The night my brother used my pain to win their love, something inside me died quietly. I remember the sound of laughter, my family's laughter, echoing through the dining hall while I stood there, holding a smile that didn't belong to me.
They were clapping for him, praising him, calling him the pride of the Thornton family. And
I was the ghost in the room, the sister who was supposed to stay silent and grateful.
No one knew the truth behind his success.
No one saw the nights I stayed up fixing his mistakes, rewriting his reports, covering his failures.
But he did. And he turned my loyalty into his weapon.
Mother said, "Maya, don't ruin the moment. Let your brother shine." So I stood there, frozen, my own achievements buried under his spotlight, my heart breaking under their approval. That was the night I realized love in my house had a price tag, and my brother had just bought it with my dignity.
But what they didn't know,
I was done being their quiet shadow.
People always said our family was perfect.
A picture of elegance, discipline, and success. From the outside, it probably looked that way, a proud father, a graceful mother, and 2 children raised with love.
But perfection is just another word for silence.
Because in our home, love wasn't shared, it was earned. Father used to say, "A family's respect depends on how the son carries the name." And every time he said that, I'd feel myself shrink a little smaller, like my existence only mattered in the shadows of Ethan's achievements.
He was the eldest, the golden one.
His words were truth, his failures forgiven, his charm irresistible. I was the calm one, the listener, the good daughter who didn't argue or ask for much. At dinner, conversations always drifted toward Ethan, his promotions, his travels, his brilliant ideas. I'd sit there quietly, pushing peas across my plate, pretending it didn't sting. Once, I tried to talk about my new project at work, and Mother interrupted, smiling at Ethan. "Your brother just got invited to that leadership conference. Isn't that wonderful?" I swallowed my words, smiled, and said, "That's great, Mom."
Our family dinners were never loud or messy.
They were rehearsed, every word polished for appearances. Father would pour wine, Ethan would tell another success story, and Mother would beam with pride. I'd laugh when expected, nod when required. Inside, I was screaming to be seen. Clara, my cousin, often joined us. She had that look of someone who enjoyed comparing. She'd glance at me and say, "Maya, you're lucky to have a brother like Ethan. He's going places." And I'd reply softly, "Yes, he is." What else could I say? Sometimes, when the guests left and the house went quiet, I'd sit by the kitchen window, watching the lights flicker across the backyard. Ethan's shadow would move through the hallway, confident, untouchable.
And I'd wonder what it felt like to be loved so easily.
My mother believed in appearances more than emotions. "Don't bring unnecessary attention, Maya," she'd say whenever I looked upset.
"People talk.
Keep the family name clean."
So I learned to hide my disappointment behind calm smiles.
Even when my ideas were dismissed, even when my efforts were claimed by someone else, I kept quiet, because that's what good daughters do. But deep down, something was changing. I began noticing small things, how my parents' tones softened for Ethan but hardened for me, how every compliment to him felt like an unspoken comparison. The balance in our family wasn't love, it was hierarchy. And then came that one evening, the night Father called for a family announcement. Everyone gathered in the living room. Mother smiled knowingly, Ethan looked proud. I stood in the corner, unsure why my heart suddenly felt heavy. Father cleared his throat and said, "We have big news about Ethan's future." The room buzzed with excitement. I forced a smile, but a strange chill ran through me. Something was about to change. And for the first time, I could feel it, the storm beneath our perfect home was starting to move. It started with a single conversation, one that was supposed to be about business but ended up rewriting my place in the family. Ethan had been working on a major proposal for Father's company, a sustainability project that could bring in new investors. I had helped him quietly, late into the nights. I wrote reports, designed presentations, fixed calculations, and even gave him the idea for the model's name, Project Eden.
It wasn't for credit. It was for family. That word still meant something to me then.
The night before the presentation, Ethan came to my room. He smiled, that same polished smile that never reached his eyes.
"Maya, you're the best. I couldn't have done this without you." I felt warmth in my chest.
"Then make sure to tell them that tomorrow."
He laughed lightly.
"Of course, sis. I always give credit where it's due.
But his eyes shifted when he said it, and something in my stomach twisted.
The next day, our family gathered in the conference hall. Father had invited board members, neighbors, and relatives. It was a show, a chance to prove his son's brilliance. The lights dimmed, and Ethan stepped forward, confident and calm.
I watched proudly from the back.
Until I heard him say, I created Project Eden to reflect my vision for the company's future. Every slide, every word, every idea, mine. And not once did my name leave his lips. Mother clapped first, tears in her eyes.
That's my boy, she whispered. Father nodded in approval.
You make me proud, son. I waited, foolishly, for Ethan to turn, to say something, anything. But he didn't. He smiled for photos, shook hands, and when people praised him, he basked in it. When Clara came up to me afterward, she smirked. Guess you'll always be the quiet helper.
I bit my tongue so hard it almost bled. That night, I confronted Ethan.
You promised you'd mention me.
He didn't even look up from his phone.
Mention you for what? You helped a little, that's all.
A little?
I did half the work. He finally met my eyes, his calm expression turning cold.
Listen, Maya. This isn't about who did what. It's about who can represent the family best.
You wouldn't understand.
My heart sank.
So this is about image, not truth.
He smirked.
Truth doesn't pay bills. The next morning, Mother called me into the living room.
She had that disappointed look that used to terrify me as a child. Why did you argue with Ethan last night?
You embarrassed him.
I tried to explain.
He took credit for my work.
She sighed. Maya, don't make this about ego.
Your brother's success is the family's success. There it was, the invisible rule again.
My silence was loyalty. My pain was duty.
Over the next few weeks, things worsened. At gatherings, people praised Ethan's leadership. Father started talking about preparing Ethan to take over the company. My name vanished from family discussions. One night, I overheard Father on the phone. Maya's good, but she's not built for business. Ethan has the real drive.
Something inside me cracked.
But the final blow came when I found out Ethan had submitted my proposal under his name for an industry award, and won.
The same project I'd poured my heart into was now his golden ticket.
During the award dinner, as he lifted the trophy and said, "This is for my family," I felt something burn deep in my chest, a quiet fire that no amount of applause could drown. I stood up, unable to breathe, and walked out of the hall. My mother followed, whispering harshly, "Maya, control yourself. Don't make a scene." I turned to her, tears trembling on my lashes. "You're asking me to be silent about a theft."
She looked at me coldly.
"I'm asking you to protect your family." That was the moment I understood. They weren't my family anymore.
Not in the way that mattered.
As the applause thundered behind me, I whispered to myself, he didn't just steal my work, he stole my worth. And somewhere deep down, a promise formed, I would make them see the truth.
No matter what it cost.
After Ethan's award night, everything in our house began to feel heavier. Not louder, just colder. Conversations carried hidden edges, glances turned into judgments, and every small silence felt like an accusation. I became the bitter sister in their story, the one who couldn't be happy for her brother. Mother stopped asking about my work altogether, and when I tried to speak during family dinners, Father would interrupt, turning the talk back to Ethan's achievements. One Sunday, we had relatives visiting, a big family brunch. The dining room smelled of roasted chicken and polished pride. I sat across from Ethan, who was retelling the story of his award-winning vision. He made it sound effortless, noble, almost heroic. Everyone was hooked. Then Aunt Lillian smiled at me and said, "Maya, you must be so proud. You taught him everything about discipline."
Ethan laughed.
"She tried," he said, sipping his coffee.
The room laughed with him. My throat tightened.
"Actually,
Mother cut in sharply. "Don't start, Maya.
It's a happy day."
I went quiet again. My coffee went cold in my hands.
After the guests left, Clara came to me with that mocking smirk. "You shouldn't take it personally. Some people are born for success, others for support." I looked at her, my voice barely steady. "And some people are born without shame." She blinked, startled, then laughed.
"Careful, Maya.
Bitterness doesn't look good on you.
That night, I cried in the shower where no one could hear me. My tears weren't just for what they did, but for who I had become trying to please them. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers started.
Rumors that I was unstable, jealous, causing tension.
I learned they came from Ethan himself.
He told colleagues that I couldn't handle his success. Even Liam, my ex-fiancé, texted me one night, "I heard you've been making things hard for your brother. You need to let it go."
Let it go. Those words haunted me.
Then came Mother's charity gala, a grand, glittering evening meant to show the Thornton family's unity.
I wore a silver gown, simple but elegant. For a moment, I almost felt visible again.
Until I noticed Ethan standing at the podium, microphone in hand, smiling that perfect smile.
"I want to thank my family," he said, eyes scanning the crowd.
"Especially my mother, for teaching me grace.
And my father, for his strength." A pause. He looked right past me. Not one word.
I felt the sting in my eyes as guests turned to look at me, pity painted across their faces. I forced a smile, but my chest burned. Afterward, I approached him behind the stage. "Do you enjoy erasing me, Ethan?"
He didn't even flinch. "Don't be dramatic.
You're making things uncomfortable for everyone."
"For everyone? Or for you?"
He leaned closer, his voice low, venom smooth. "You're irrelevant, Maya. Stop trying to matter."
The words hit harder than I expected.
I stood frozen, heart pounding, watching him walk away, surrounded by people who saw him as a hero. Later that night, I overheard Father say, "We need to keep Maya out of company affairs. She's too emotional." Mother agreed softly, "It's better that way. Ethan can handle things alone." I realized then that they weren't just blind, they had chosen not to see me.
But something inside me was changing.
The silence that once protected me was beginning to suffocate me. Every insult, every dismissal, every lie, it was building pressure beneath my calm. And when I found out what Ethan planned next, something so cruel it could destroy me completely, that pressure was ready to explode. Because what he didn't know was that I had started collecting everything. Emails, drafts, notes, proof of every word I'd written, every idea he'd stolen.
The storm was coming.
And this time, I wouldn't be the quiet one. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of day that pretends to be peaceful. The house smelled like freshly brewed coffee and polished wood. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, painting everything in gold. It could have been a normal morning, but I should have known, golden things in my house were always poisoned.
Mother called from the living room.
Her voice was overly calm, rehearsed.
"Maya, come sit. We need to talk as a family."
Those words, as a family, had started to sound like a warning. When I entered, Father was seated near the fireplace, looking stern. Ethan stood by the window, pretending to check his phone.
Clara was there too, of course.
She never missed an opportunity to watch a family fall apart.
Father cleared his throat.
"We've been thinking about the company's future," he began, his tone heavy with false importance. "Your mother and I have decided to make some changes, permanent ones."
I nodded slowly.
"All right. What kind of changes?"
He avoided my eyes. "We're restructuring the business.
Ethan will be taking full control of the company's leadership, and all legal ownership rights will transfer under his name."
The words hit like a slap.
"What do you mean? That's my position too. I've been working there for years."
Father sighed, impatient. "You've always been supportive, Maya."
"But Ethan has proven himself capable of carrying the family name." I stared at him, disbelief burning through my chest. "Proven himself? With my work?" Ethan chuckled under his breath.
"You're overreacting, Maya.
It's just business." "Business?"
My voice shook.
"You stole from me, Ethan, my ideas, my reputation, and now my inheritance."
Mother stood, voice sharp.
"Enough.
We are not turning this into another scene.
Ethan has earned this."
I laughed bitterly. "Earned it?"
"You mean performed it?"
The silence that followed was louder than shouting. Even Clara looked uncomfortable. Then Father dropped the final blow.
"We've also updated the will," he said quietly. "The estate, company, and assets will go to Ethan. You'll receive a trust fund, of course, but we think it's best for you to start your own path." I froze. "You're disinheriting me." He didn't respond, which was answer enough.
My hands trembled, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. I turned to my mother, my last hope. Mom, you know this isn't fair. She looked away, eyes glassy but firm. Fairness doesn't keep families respected, Maya. Unity does. There it was again, that twisted word. Unity. It meant silence. Submission. Erasure. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You should thank me. I'm saving you from responsibilities you clearly can't handle. I stared at him, my vision blurring with fury. You're saving yourself from exposure. He smiled coldly. Maybe. But no one believes the quiet ones, Maya. Remember that. I wanted to scream, to tear through every illusion they'd built around him. But instead, I just stood there, paralyzed between heartbreak and rage. When I finally found my voice, it came out small but sharp. You'll regret this. Ethan's smirk deepened. No, you will. That night, I packed my things. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. As I walked out, Mother's voice floated behind me, emotionless, like a closing door. Take care of yourself, Maya. I didn't look back. 4 days, I drifted between anger and disbelief. My apartment felt colder than ever. The silence that used to comfort me now mocked me. I stopped going to work. Colleagues whispered, investors pulled away, Ethan had already poisoned everything. He told everyone I had mental issues, that I was unstable and jealous. Even the media picked up fragments of his narrative. My name was dragged through every whisper, every social post. I became the scandal he warned them about. I remember sitting by my window one night, watching the city lights blur through my tears. The world had moved on, but I was still standing in the ruins of my family's lies. For the first time in my life, I had no one. No mother, no father, no brother, just the echo of their betrayal. The next morning, I went to the office building one last time. My nameplate had already been removed. On Ethan's desk sat the award, my award, gleaming under the light. He saw me standing there and smiled as if I were a stranger. Security will escort you out, he said simply. That was it, the final humiliation. I walked out without a word. But as I reached the door, I turned and said quietly, enjoy your throne, Ethan. Just remember, every kingdom falls when truth arrives. He laughed, dismissive. You still believe truth matters? I looked him straight in the eye. I do. And I'm coming for it. I left the building with nothing but a folder in my bag, a folder full of proof. Emails, files, timestamps, everything he thought I had deleted. For the first time in months, I felt something new rising in me, not sadness, not fear, but focus. They had taken everything from me, my name, my work, my place in the family. But they had also given me something far more powerful, a reason. And that reason was all I needed. They destroyed my name to build his empire. Now, I would destroy his empire to rebuild my name. That was the night I stopped being the victim. That was the night I became the storm. After the world closed its doors on me, I did the only thing left that felt honest. I collected the truth. Piece by piece, I rebuilt myself around facts, not feelings. The nights of trembling turned into nights of strategy. My grief sharpened into focus. I stopped asking why and started asking how. First, I protected what I had. I copied every draft, every email, every timestamped file I had ever touched. I pulled backups from old drives, dug through cloud folders, and printed contracts Ethan thought no one could see. Each page felt like a reclaimed piece of me. You won't get away with this, I whispered to the cardboard stack on my kitchen table. Then I found allies in unexpected places. Mrs. Brooks, our neighbor, had noticed my late nights at the office. She agreed to corroborate my presence during Project Eden's creation. Noah, the friend who never once asked for a favor, offered his steady hands and a camera. We'll make this clean, he said. No theatrics. Just proof. I learned to trust small mercies, a voice that didn't judge, a hand that didn't look away. My plan had to be precise. Ethan had built his fortress on charm and selective truth. I would collapse it with time-stamped reality and public accountability. I mapped every meeting he attended, every speech he gave, and every person who praised him for work they hadn't seen. I made a list of witnesses, former colleagues, a contractor who had emailed me directly, a junior analyst Ethan had warned to stay silent. Each witness became a thread. I would pull one, then another, until the tapestry unraveled. I knew exposure alone wasn't enough. Ethan understood optics. So I prepared a demonstration that couldn't be dismissed as sour grapes. Noah helped me edit a concise presentation, side-by-side slides of my original documents and Ethan's published versions, email chains showing my authorship, recorded messages where he admitted he'd relied on my work. We added dates, metadata, and corroborating testimony. It was not drama, it was evidence. This will leave no room for his lies, Noah said, tapping the final slide. Emotionally, I trained myself to be unreadable. Where once I had flinched at every look, I learned to hold my face like a calm sea. I practiced delivering my words, not with the wail of a betrayed woman, but with the quiet authority of someone listing facts. The most dangerous part of the plan was not legal maneuvering or public humiliation. It was me. Could I stand in a room full of people who loved the man who broke me and say the truth without crumbling? Could I sacrifice being liked to be believed? There were risks I could not quantify. Ethan might try to discredit me, paint me unstable again, or use his influence to bury witnesses. He could file counterclaims, or worse, turn the family more firmly against me. I rehearsed for each possibility, lining up copies of proof in multiple hands, sending secure backups to journalists, even drafting legal notices I wasn't sure I could afford. Every contingency tightened the plan and hardened me. At night, I felt the old ache, the hollow where my family used to be, but it no longer ruled me. It was fuel. The girl who once hid her pain learned to carry it like armor. The last piece fell into place when I scheduled the moment, Ethan's charity gala, the same stage where he loved to collect applause. It was public, theatrical, and unavoidable. If the truth went out there, it would reach the exact audience that had crowned him. Noah looked at me before we left, eyes soft but steady. "Are you ready?" he asked. I folded my fingers around the folder in my bag, the weight of every page pressing against my palm. "I am," I said. And then, with the gala lights waiting and the room full of people who had laughed when I cried, I stepped toward the door, wondering if the woman who had been broken could do what she must do without breaking again. The night of the charity gala was a mirror image of every humiliation I'd ever endured, but this time, I wasn't the same woman who had once swallowed her truth. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and champagne, laughter floating through the air like smoke. My family stood at the front table, radiant in their curated perfection. Father in his polished tuxedo, mother in her sequined pride, and Ethan, glowing under the lights, basking in a glory built from my silence. I walked in quietly, wearing black, not out of mourning, but out of resolve. The weight of the evidence folder in my hand felt heavier than any jewel. Noah stayed close, filming from a corner, our silent signal ready. The host's voice echoed through the microphone. "And now, to honor a man of vision, dedication, and innovation, Mr. Ethan Thornton." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Ethan stepped onto the stage, charming as ever, waving like a king returning from war. He began his speech, perfect as always. "I stand here tonight not just for myself, but for my family, who taught me integrity and strength." My hands clenched. Integrity. That word hit like a blade. As he continued, I walked slowly toward the stage. At first, no one noticed, until my heels clicked against the marble floor. The crowd quieted, eyes turning. Ethan froze mid-sentence. "Excuse me," I said calmly, taking the second microphone. My voice carried through the hall, steady but cold. "There's something everyone here deserves to know before we celebrate." Mother's face went pale. "Maya," she hissed, "sit down." I smiled faintly. "You've all heard about Project Eden, the innovation that made this family's reputation soar. But what you haven't heard is who really built it." Gasps rippled across the crowd. Ethan stepped forward, mask slipping. "Maya, this isn't the time." I cut him off. "No, Ethan. You've had all the time. Tonight, it's my turn." Noah switched the screen behind us. The projector flickered to life, displaying my first email, timestamped, dated months before Ethan's version. Then came the drafts, design notes, digital signatures, all under my name. Murmurs filled the hall. Ethan's confident tone cracked. "These are fabricated." "Really?" I asked. The next slide showed our chat logs, his messages thanking me for handling the proposal. Each new click stripped him bare. The proof was merciless, clinical, undeniable. Father's face hardened. Mother looked shattered. Clara whispered something to another cousin, eyes wide with disbelief. "This is what you built your empire on, Ethan," I said softly. "My work, my silence, my loyalty." He tried to step closer, voice rising. "You think this will change anything? They'll never believe you." I looked around the hall, the same crowd that had once clapped for him, and said, "They already do." The room erupted in whispers. Reporters lifted their phones. The host awkwardly backed away from the stage. Father stood abruptly.
"Ethan, tell me this isn't true."
Ethan stammered, "Dad, I can explain." But I interrupted one last time. "No need.
The explanation's already written. I've sent every document to the company board, the investors, and the press."
The hall went silent. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at me, not as his sister, but as the one thing he could never control again. For a long, heavy moment, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "You've destroyed everything." I met his gaze, calm and unshaken. "No, Ethan. I just returned what you stole." Mother began to cry softly, the sound echoing through the hollow silence of that perfect hall. Father turned away, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I stepped back from the stage, microphone lowering in my hand. Every breath felt like release. Every step away from that spotlight felt lighter. Behind me, Ethan's voice broke. "Maya, wait." But I didn't stop. As I walked toward the exit, I heard the applause start, slow, hesitant at first, then growing louder, echoing through the hall like thunder. It wasn't for him anymore. It was for the truth. And in that sound, that pure, unfiltered sound of awakening, I felt the weight of years lift off my shoulders. I didn't look back, not even once. Because justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't shout. It simply stands there, calm, undeniable, and devastating. The next morning, the world woke up to the truth. Articles spread across business blogs, social pages, and industry magazines. Project Eden, the real architect exposed. It was surreal, seeing my name finally appear beside something I'd built, not as an afterthought, but as its rightful creator. Ethan's empire began to crumble faster than I imagined. The board suspended him pending investigation. Investors withdrew, citing ethical concerns. Every smile that once surrounded him turned cautious, distant, judgmental. The same people who had praised him now whispered his name with discomfort. At home, my parents' phones rang endlessly. They didn't answer. For a family obsessed with reputation, silence had become their punishment. I didn't visit them. I couldn't. Some wounds aren't healed by apologies, only by distance. Instead, I packed what little I had left and moved into a small apartment overlooking the city. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. There were no portraits of Ethan on the walls, no voices telling me to stay quiet. Just peace. And peace felt strange, almost foreign, like learning to breathe again after years underwater. A few weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was Ethan's. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Maya, you won. I hope it feels as good as it looks. I never meant to take everything from you, but I didn't know how to live without their approval. Now I know, it was never love, just applause." I read it once, then folded it quietly. There was no joy in his downfall. Revenge hadn't brought me celebration, it had brought me clarity. I didn't destroy him to feel powerful. I exposed him because truth deserves a voice, even when that voice trembles. Mother called once, days later. Her voice was brittle, thin. "Maya, what have we done?" I wanted to say everything I'd bottled up for years, the loneliness, the silence, the hunger for her pride. But all I said was, "You chose peace over justice, Mom." I chose justice. And then I hung up. From then on, I built my life slowly, honestly. Noah and I started consulting independently, helping small businesses develop ideas without the politics of greed. It wasn't wealth that drove me anymore, it was freedom. Every new client, every small success, reminded me that respect isn't inherited, it's earned, word by word, truth by truth. Sometimes, I'd still think about that gala night, the faces frozen in shock, the weight of the microphone in my hand, the sound of my own voice echoing through the hall. It no longer haunted me. It reminded me that courage isn't loud. It's choosing to speak when silence feels safer. One evening, standing on my balcony, watching the sun fade behind the skyline, I whispered to myself,
They tried to bury me in silence, but they didn't know I was learning to grow in the dark.
That became my truth. The lies had fallen apart. The applause had faded. But dignity, my dignity, had finally returned home.